This pointless game of hide and seek must stop. Explain.
Yeah. Well, that's my metaphor for what we've been doing, really, since the first lockdown in March. And I see that about a quarter of the country is now in lockdown as we speak this weekend, in regional lockdown. So they're spreading again. And there's no guarantee that we won't have another complete lockdown at some point in the future. And then there are all these sort of ancillary measures that are coming from the side, like the rule of six and all of that. And it just seems to me that it is becoming absolutely evident to anybody with a pulse that we are not going to defeat this virus by running away from it. We are playing this mad game of hide and seek, where basically we dive under the bedclothes and sort of tremble there for 1 week, 2 weeks, whether you're in isolation for 2 weeks or 3 months in lockdown, and we come out sort of half expecting the virus to have gone away. Well, it's not going. It's here to stay, in exactly the same way as flu viruses and the cold virus and many other diseases and illnesses, part of our human existence. This is a new one, and it's come as a bit of a shock, and it's not a very pleasant one, but it's not the Black Death. Most people, the vast majority of people who get this virus will either not know that they've had it unless they have a test, or they'll have extremely minor symptoms. And I know that there are tragic cases where people die from it and have very long-lasting effects, but they are in a tiny minority. And just taking this kind of group head-in-the-sand attitude and then lifting our heads out of the sand and somehow for everything to be all right again is crazy. It's perfectly obvious to anybody that every time we go back to a semi-normal existence after locking ourselves away as a nation for a while, cases are going to rise again, whether we test for them or not. Of course they are. That's in the nature of viruses. And I don't think there's any example in the history of the world, going all the way back to written records, where isolation and quarantine gets rid of a virus or is a long-term solution to it. It's always a very, very short-term response. And in our case, it's becoming a long-term response, and it is insane.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You have written in stark capital letters, how much longer must this national version of Je Sans Frontières continue? Very good, by the way. Je Sans Frontières continue before Boris Johnson points to the elephant in the room, a great lumbering fact of life that increasing numbers of us have been aware of for months. Lockdown doesn't work. This is what I feel as well, that we are somehow locked in a kind of circle of insanity. We have a COVID-fixated government. By the way, coronavirus is the 24th most common cause of death in this country. The 24th.
24th, yeah.
There are 23 conditions that cause more deaths than COVID. Why are we fixating on this one thing? And to be honest with you, as you just implied, Richard, humanity has never done this before. We have never seen a virus and said, right, let's lock down all our economies, let's lock people in their houses, shut down the country, shut down the world economy. We've never done this before to fight a virus. It's quite clearly not working. And can I just sort of say one thing that is a very difficult subject to dare to broach, and that is, I'm afraid that, as we always have done, we're going to have to accept the fact that some people die. Trying to stop deaths in this drastic way is going to be the death of us economically.
Well, I think it is roughly. I mean, you can make lots of metaphors for this. Hide and seek is one of them. Here's another one. It's as if we've had a rather nasty spate of accidents, say over Christmas on the road. Deaths have spiked on the road, and everybody's told to park their car on the drive and not drive for 2 months. Yes, accident rates will drop, accident rates will fall away, but the moment everybody's allowed to get back in their cars again, accidents will start to happen again. And accidents, road accidents, are part of the risk that we accept for living on this planet in the way that we do.
Yeah.
We haven't even touched upon the risks of lockdown, of isolation. I mean, there's a report, I've only had access to one or two national UK papers this morning, but I've looked at the Telegraph, and there's a report in the Telegraph that says that a formal report was laid before SAID back in June or July that predicted that around 70,000 people would die, not as a result of COVID, but as a result of the restrictions that we're placing on society. And we know this is happening. People are having heart attacks and dying at home because they're frightened to go to hospital.
Terrified to go to hospital, yeah.
People are dying. I have somebody I know, an acquaintance of a friend of mine, who's just been diagnosed, and I'm not making this up, but this was yesterday, who's just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it's quite possible that one of the reasons that cancer is terminal is because he was declined treatment because of COVID for 3 months during lockdown. So for 3 months, he didn't have the chemotherapy or possibly the surgery that he clearly needed. 12 weeks have gone by and more, and he's now in final stage cancer. Now, it's impossible to prove that it was a result of not being treated, but it's very likely. And, you know, locking everybody up for weeks at a time or 2 weeks of isolation is actually causing deaths from other causes. And we have to face up to that and strike a balance.
Yeah, I mean, official figures released, I think it's by Public Health England, did reveal that at least 12,000 people officially died during the 3 months of the intense lockdown because they were not allowed to go into our COVID-only hospitals. They were suffering from other conditions, fatal conditions. They were not allowed to be treated because we're obsessing on the coronavirus. This is the real tragedy, that our fixation with this one condition is causing untold problems, not only economically, but physically, and of course in the realms of mental health. What about the mental health of the nation?
And excuse me, I seem to remember that the reason that we all rather grumpily, but in good order, agreed back in March to lockdown, and it ended up being 3 months of lockdown, was to, and I quote, protect the NHS. And what was meant by that was protecting beds and services and treatments for everybody, not just people with COVID, but for people with other conditions who, if we didn't do something, might find that they couldn't be treated because the wards were overflowing. The wards never did overflow. We built the Nightingale hospitals, which were barely used. There was plenty of capacity. The lockdown certainly into the NHS, and yet people were still not being treated when there were beds available because of, as you say, of COVID. It's illogical. It makes no sense. If I'm dying because my circulatory system is failing, my heart is failing, I'm just as much at risk, if not more, of death from that as I would be potentially from catching COVID. I don't know what's happened to us. I was looking at the news this morning and seeing what happened in Manchester now, with all of these poor students who've just arrived, to begin this incredibly important phase in their lives, and they've been put straight into house arrest for 2 weeks, because that's what it is. Yeah. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how they're going to get food and supplies and stuff to them, but anyway, I suppose logistically they'll manage. But what a start. And how incredibly, insanely, depressingly predictable. What do people think is going to happen if you get hundreds and thousands of students locked together in an environment on campus? Are they not going to infect each other? Yeah. Of course they are. Yeah. And actually, they're the group, or one of the groups, least at risk if they do, in fact, contract the virus. The chances of even displaying symptoms, if you're in your teens or 20s, are very low. And the chances of becoming seriously ill or dying are vanishingly small. They're in a very safe group. They can afford to get it.
Yes. Now, I'll tell you why this piece you've written in the Daily Express is such a great read. It's because you viscerally, your fury just shines through it. It really does. And you talked of this bizarre spectacle of the two Ronnies of medicine, Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty. They call them in Parliament, by the way, half-witty and unbalanced. Now, they were on telly earlier this week. Bizarre sight. These two dorky scientists addressing the nation with no facts, just their vague kind of warning that they feared quite a few people might die. We might get 200 people dying a day. We might have 50,000 cases a day, but that wasn't a prediction. That was, and you say in your piece, and I couldn't agree with you more, that was naked scaremongering. It was, wasn't it?
Undoubtedly. You can form no other conclusion, journalistically or logically, to that sequence of their presentation. Most of it had my jaw on the carpet. But when Whitty or Vance unveiled the graph, which showed this exponential curve sweeping upwards to 50,000 cases a single day by mid-October, if we didn't do what they told us to do, even in that moment, I thought that can't be right. And subsequently, epidemiologists and statisticians looked at the way they calculated that figure and said, it isn't even a calculation. It's just a wild guess. Earlier in the presentation, they compared the increase in cases in our country with France and Germany. We're on a very, very similar track as France and Germany. We're about 2 weeks behind, as you know. They're actually on course to reach just under 10,000 cases a day at worst scenario. So why would Britain, who are supposed to be paralleling the French and German models, why would we leap up to 50,000? It was a figure plucked from the air, and that graph was a piece of propaganda.